Welcome back to The Line. The Santa Fe New Mexican reported in the last month that the city is losing out on millions of dollars of potential revenue from unlicensed vacation rentals in the city. According to the paper, owners of these vacation rentals joints use sites like Airbnb and Craigslist to advertise to visitors and others who need a short-term rental. The city requires now that short-term rentals pay fees and undergo inspections. And this is part of a larger conversation about the sharing economy. We're going to use that term a lot here. And sites like Airbnb, which allows people to rent out rooms, homes, and apartments. And Uber, by the way, which connects drivers to people who are looking for a ride. And Harry, same, isn't it? This sharing economy. Let's kind of pull back the lens here a little bit and just kind of talk about the sharing economy in total and what it means to New Mexico. Something is fundamentally changing here. It's almost as if citizens now are looking at all their possessions, cars, homes, beds, everything, and saying, okay, this is now a place I can make income. Right. What's wrong with that?
There's nothing inherently wrong with that. The problem is that public policy is not really caught up to where the economy is going. I absolutely agree that there's a paradigm shift that's going on, but even the ways that we talk about it, if we think about this as the sharing economy, if I'm charging you for something, I'm not really sharing it with you, I'm going to business for myself. So there's a lot of shifts in attitudes in terms of ownership. So younger people thinking, well, why do I have to tie up money in owning something when I can just rent it? The problem is that there still needs to be consumer protection. There are still issues related to taxation. And the problem is that this looks very similar to internet commerce, where we got way behind the curve in terms of regulating it, and now we're trying to catch up. And those are the sorts of things. So there's nothing inherently wrong with the business model. It's the ways that we think about regulation.
Interesting. A part of that regulation, Rob Nikolewski, is the idea of taxation and also using other fees, whatever you want to call them, to pay for other things in those communities the same way hoteliers and others in the business have to do it. So it's about parity at some level, would you say? Right,
and it's also it's reshaping the way we think about things. I mean, if you want to rent out your own house or rent out a room to your house, it makes you rethink. Well, are the taxes that I would be paying under the old system, are those really a good use of money, and why is the government taking that money? And I think it brings up good questions about that. But in many ways, the genie's already out of the bottle. And I don't know how you're going to get it back in.
But in regards to Santa Fe and what's going on with home rental units, no one can blame folks, hotel owners and others. 600 listings is an incredible assault when you think about the available rooms up in Santa Fe.
But why are people attracted to Airbnb? Because if I want to go to Santa Fe for one day and I want to climb Atalaya Peak and I want to maybe go skiing or something, I'm not going to be spending that time in that hotel room. I just need a place to crash.
That's right.
And I don't want to spend $220 for a decent hotel room. I mean, and that's sort of what's going on with taxi services as well. I can go to, I can call Uber. I know I'm going to get a clean car. It's going to arrive very quickly. It's going to arrive when they say it's going to arrive. In many ways, the hotel business brought this on themselves.
Interesting. I've heard that up from Laura, from others that said, look, Santa Fe is a unique situation, actually, when you really think about it. It's almost tailor-made for Airbnb, and that's the hard part, I think, for hotel people. Because if you're coming in from out of town, you really want to have that experience that Rob is describing. There's benefits to being downtown in a hotel, certainly, but there's also benefits the other way. So how do we find fairness for both sides here?
I think it's a tough one for the city of Santa Fe and just the surrounding areas, and even Albuquerque to a certain extent.
Taos is going through this for sure.
One of the issues with Santa Fe and Taos too is that so much of the jobs that are there, decent jobs, good jobs, are part of that tourism industry. And so as hotels have to compete with Airbnb and other types of sharing economy type properties that they rent out, they have to stay competitive, and that might mean cutting staff. So you're talking about potentially affecting people who have regular jobs, and that then has a ripple effect on the economy. But I think one of the important things, and one of the interesting things, I agree with what Harry was saying, policy hasn't caught up to a lot of that. I mean, as an example, when I worked at Tax and Rev in about 2012, 2013, we were just dealing then, and there was a case that went through the court system with taxing online booksellers. So Barnes & Noble, as well as Amazon and others, and in this case it was Barnes & Noble in particular, and there was an issue about them paying gross receipts taxes at their local store versus paying gross receipts taxes in New Mexico from their online sales. And they were trying to argue that they weren't connected. The online sales was a separate subsidiary of the parent company versus the stationary, bricks and mortar property. Ultimately, the court decided that they were actually affiliated. They had enough affiliation, and therefore their sales were subject to gross receipts tax. And that's a huge chunk of money for the state and for local municipalities. So I think, but we're talking about, online booksellers in 2013. How long have we been doing online book sales, book purchasing? So that's how long it took for it to actually catch up. I think in this situation, we're looking at another 10 years before we figure out how do we actually wrap our arms around it. So what's interesting, I think, and what the city could do proactively is really work with Airbnb and other companies like this to actually come up with an agreement on a percentage of taxes that they would charge. Maybe something that isn't the equivalent to what hotels charge in their lodger's tax, but something else. And already Airbnb has several municipalities around the world and around the country, everything from Chamonix, Mont Blanc in France in the French Alps to Tampa, Florida to San Jose, California. Different municipalities who are able to charge that extra lodger's tax or whatever tax, and then they get to collect that. And I think Santa Fe definitely, because people want to come here as a destination, there's a lot of younger people who use this and feel very comfortable doing this versus a hotel.
That's right.
They really need to jump on it and move quickly.
Interesting. Follow up on that. That's an interesting point because Laura quite well describes the tricky nature of this as we go down the road. It's going to be interesting.
Yeah, and she says the French town's really cool.
I know.
I did take 2 years of French in college.
The issue that City of Santa Fe has, I think, is very different than the issues that Taos has, that Albuquerque has, because I'm sure that with Balloon Fiesta, there's a lot of Airbnb and VRBO, or vacation rental by owner kind of traffic going on. The issue being faced in the City of Santa Fe is that they have a very real budget crisis, and there's an estimate of a $2 million bogey out there. You bet it's a cash grab, and so they're going to try and do it, and they're going to try and accommodate everyone.
Right. And
I think that they can do it. One of the things that an Airbnb provides that you can't get at a hotel is that you have more of the conversation with the homeowner, whereas with the hotel you have a consistent experience. You don't have a consistent experience at an Airbnb. That's right. And you know exactly what you're paying for. And so I think that if it could succeed anywhere, I think it could very well succeed in Santa Fe, more so than anywhere else, because it's a walking type of place. It's a fantastic place to visit.
That's right. And a lot of these places are ganged up near the plaza, and it's very interesting. And Harry, Tom brings up a couple of interesting points there that if you think about it, for folks who really want to participate, the hotel folks are taking an interesting tack. They're saying, look, let's take away the caps.
Right.
Let's take away the cap on the amount of times.
Right.
Let's actually open this up a little bit, and perhaps more money would come in on the back end. Are they taking the right approach?
I think they are taking the right approach, because otherwise it feels like they're just acting in a completely self-interested way of trying to keep others out of the market, as opposed to saying, let's have a rational basis and for regulation, and regulation that we can actually defend. So things like limitations on the number of day stays per year are really unenforceable, and in fact would drive the business underground, make it harder to tax.
That's right. And you don't want people knocking on people's doors, city officials knocking on people's doors in Santa Fe saying, hey, I saw this guy walking in your back door. Is he a renter, or is he your uncle? What's going on? We want to avoid all that at some point.
Right, but I mean, what's driving this though is the bottom line.
Yeah.
People don't, and if people maybe in general they would say, yeah, I guess Harry makes a good point about about taxes. They should be paying that, but I still want that $100 or $95 room because I'm just a little guy.
That's right. That's right. Interesting. Up next, Senators Martin Heinrich and Tom Udall tell us about reforms they would like to see in the mining industry in the U.S.